Welcome to the Human Momentum Podcast. I'm your host, Erik Schabert, D.O. If you are looking to optimize your health and avoid or failing that, manage and recover from the illnesses, injuries, and diseases that stop so many of us from moving forward through life, you are in the right place. It's my mission to make this podcast an essential, evidence-based resource for people like you who are looking to know what you can do at home to optimize your health and are looking to gather the information you need to get the most out of your relationships with your doctor and other healthcare professionals. Don't forget to smash that subscribe button if this is your first time here, and please remember to like and share this episode if you find it helpful or informative. Also, be aware that I read all of my comments and will attempt to respond to any questions from my viewers as it is appropriate. With that in mind, let's get on with today's episode. All right, welcome to today's episode. The story that inspired today's podcast begins 2 years ago when I received a call from my mother. She and my father have been living abroad since 2017 because my father had suffered a stroke at that time, and his level of disability was just too much for my mom to take care of at home by herself. So they had moved to Mexico where they could afford in-home help on a daily basis. Well, my mother tells me that she and my dad are both getting progressively sicker and have been for several weeks. And my dad had gone from being able to transfer from the bed to the wheelchair to the toilet, and back to the wheelchair with fairly minimal assistance to needing all kinds of help, and my mother being unable to handle him transferring at all. Additionally, his cognitive function had declined and he was starting to have problems controlling his bowel and bladder. At the same time, my mother was noticing her memory and ability to think getting extremely bad, and she was extraordinarily fatigued and very weak. Well, for obvious reasons, I told them that they needed to seek immediate medical care. And when they went in and got tested, what was found was that they both were suffering from excessively toxic levels of vitamin D, and both had elevated calcium as a result, and that was generating a boatload of severe symptoms for them. Well, fortunately, they were both able to be discharged home very quickly, and just with plenty of fluids and ceasing all supplements, they were able to get their vitamin D levels down within the matter of a couple of months. It was a miserable several months, though, and my dad lost a significant amount of strength during the episode, so it was not a nothing burger, so to speak. Well, when we started trying to figure out what happened, we were able to trace back in 2018, my father and mother both had testing for vitamin D and were found to have quite low levels and began supplementation. For the first 2 years or so after they started that, they were getting levels checked regularly and they were ideal. So they stopped. And what had happened several weeks before, I think maybe even 2 months or so before these episodes started, my mother had purchased a new vitamin D supplement online and brought it in. She thought it was identical to what they'd been getting, but it turns out it was a knockoff of the brand that they'd been getting and was a completely different company. Well, almost certainly the capsules they got contained far more vitamin D than what the label said. And that's why they suddenly had these extremely toxic levels. They were never able to get the capsules tested, so we don't know for certain, but I strongly suspect that's the case because they have both resumed more modest vitamin D supplementation since then and have had no further problems. Well, I hadn't thought a lot about this episode until 2 weeks ago. I saw a report from Spain, and what had happened is the Spanish Agency for Food Safety and Nutrition issued a warning about a potential poisoning from a multivitamin sold in Spain, an image of which you can see over my shoulder right now, that contained far more vitamin D than it was supposed to. It was supposed to be 1,000 international unit supplement, which is a relatively modest and very safe dosage. But these capsules contained far more than they were supposed to. As a result, 16 individuals in the Balearic Island region of Spain ended up with toxic levels of vitamin D, several of whom required hospitalization. Fortunately, no one died, but testing confirmed these individuals had severely toxic levels of vitamin D and hypercalcemia with acute renal failure and severe nausea and weakness and muscle spasms and numerous other very unpleasant symptoms associated with this toxicity. So, just as a reminder, when we are talking about vitamin D testing, 25 hydroxy vitamin D levels are what you want to check, and a level below 20 is considered vitamin D deficiency, and a level of 20 to 30 we call vitamin D insufficiency. I would say that for the majority of people, an optimal vitamin D level is going to be between 50 and 80 nanograms per deciliter. And just so we're aware of this, vitamin D is rather poorly named. Although we have always referred to it as a vitamin, we have found now its function is much more like a hormone. It is something that under ideal conditions, if you have sufficient magnesium circulating, and if you are getting regular sun exposure, at least 40% of your body exposed for 20 minutes or more a day, should result in you making enough vitamin D to not need supplementation. But a great many of us just don't get in the sun unless we have sunscreens on that do blunt our ability to produce vitamin D, which is understandable if we're trying to avoid skin cancer. So in that case, getting your levels checked, supplementing, but having that monitored by a physician makes sense. But ensuring that monitoring occurs is very important. While vitamin D toxicity episodes do remain fairly rare, they are almost always associated with self-medicating vitamin D without a doctor's supervision. And more frequently, this is occurring in children. So let's be careful of this and try and get a doctor involved if we're doing supplementing long-term. And on the off chance you are going to supplement without regular testing, keep the international unit amounts that you're taking relatively low. I would say 1,000 IUs or less if you're not going to be getting regular testing, because that just is going to increase your safety margins. Additionally, let's talk a little bit about supplement safety here, because obviously here we have at least 2 cases where supplements were faulty and it resulted in harm to individuals. Sadly, this is not entirely uncommon. We have had numerous incidences of companies putting supplements on the market that didn't contain what they said they did and being fined for it later, including some of the biggest episodes were a company called Hydroxycut, which put supplements on the market that had prescription medications in them. So do be careful. Try to do a little bit of online sleuthing when you're buying supplements. And organizations like NSA and NSF, these are private industry organizations that do evaluate supplements produced by companies for their content, making sure they're both safe and at doses that are as effective as what they are claiming are in these products. These organizations, although they are private and funded by industry, actually do some pretty decent work, in my opinion. And the supplements that on their websites that they have certified are safer than ones that have not been certified. All right, folks, I hope this was a helpful discussion for you. And please do remember to subscribe if you haven't done so already. It really helps me get the podcast out to more people. And go ahead and hit that like button and share this around if you found it informative and you think you got somebody who might enjoy this content as well. And do remember, I review my comments and I will respond as I am able. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you next time.